The Vermin Archivist. I remember the day it all fell apart. I stood in the dimly lit conference room, the stench of mildew and stale coffee lingering in the air as the health department's board members leaned back, their eyes glazed over with disbelief. I had just presented my findings on the unnatural vermin swarms that had begun to plague our city, the swarming, pulsating masses that appeared at disaster sites like grotesque omens. Instead of applause, I was met with laughter, a cacophony of ridicule that echoed in my ears long after I'd fled the room. "You're out of your mind, Greg," they had said, dismissing me like a child with a nightmare. That laughter still haunts me. I was ousted, a disgrace. My family, once supportive, turned their backs. "You'll embarrass us," my mother had said, her voice a sharp blade. "This obsession will ruin your life." They couldn't understand. How could they? They were safe in their suburban bubble, while I stood on the precipice of something terrifying and magnificent. Years passed, and in the shadows of my solitude, I delved deeper into my work. I became the Vermin Archivist, cataloging every bizarre detail of those cryptids that crawled beneath the surface. I spent sleepless nights poring over maps, tracing their movements, and connecting the dots that others refused to see. Each discovery pulled me further down a rabbit hole of darkness, revealing patterns that suggested something monstrous was lurking just beneath our feet, waiting to break through. Now, years later, I stood before my childhood home, the place that held the echoes of my past ridicule. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward me, beckoning me to enter. I was no longer the man they had mocked. I was an expert, a survivor of horrors that had turned my mind into a fortress of knowledge. But as I approached the door, my heart raced with trepidation. Would they see me as I was now, or would they still see the delusional failure? I knocked, and the door creaked open. My mother's face twisted in disbelief. "Greg?" she whispered, as if saying my name would conjure a different version of me. My father appeared behind her, his brow furrowed with confusion. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice cold. "I've come to show you," I replied, my voice steady, though my insides churned. "I've discovered something you need to see." They exchanged skeptical glances, and for a moment I feared they would slam the door in my face. But they let me in, and as I crossed the threshold, I felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. I retrieved a small jar from my bag, filled with grotesque specimens, tiny, writhing creatures that pulsed like living shadows. "These are the vermin I've been studying," I said, my voice trembling with urgency. "They're not just pests. They're messengers of something far more sinister." My father scoffed. "What have you done, Greg? You're still chasing ghosts?" But my mother, her eyes wide, took a step closer, drawn in by the grotesque beauty of my findings. "What do you mean, messengers?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the moment of truth. "They're mapping something beneath the city. There's a connection between the disasters and their swarming behavior. It's a warning." A sudden chill swept through the room, as if the air itself had thickened. I felt the ground shift beneath me, a tremor of dread that echoed the warnings I had unearthed. "You need to listen," I pleaded, but the moment was shattered by the sound of scratching at the window, a sound that sent shivers racing down my spine. My parents froze, their expressions shifting from skepticism to fear. I turned to the window, and there they were, thousands of shadowy forms crawling in unison, their beady eyes reflecting the fading light. They were everywhere, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to pulse with life. "Greg!" my mother cried, stepping back, but I held my ground. This was my truth, and they needed to confront it. "This is what I was trying to tell you." The scratching intensified, a cacophony of tiny claws against the glass, as if they were desperate to get in. "What have you done?" my father shouted, his voice laced with panic. "Get them away!" But I couldn't. I was entranced, caught in the web of horror I'd woven. "They're not just vermin," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the chaos. "They're the harbingers of what's to come." As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness enveloped the room. The vermin outside began to coalesce, forming shapes that twisted and turned, morphing into something both familiar and grotesque. I felt the room constrict, the air thickening with dread. "They're mapping the disasters," I repeated, my heart pounding as the shadows seemed to reach for us, clawing at the edges of our reality. In that moment, my family saw what they had refused to believe. The creatures outside were not just vermin. They were the embodiment of our fears, the manifestation of all the horrors I had faced alone, their eyes filled with an understanding that transcended our world. Bore witness to the truth I had uncovered. My parents recoiled, horror etched on their faces, as the shadows pushed against the window, a relentless tide of darkness. "Greg, please," my mother sobbed, but it was too late. They had ridiculed me, dismissed me, and now they were confronted with the consequences of their disbelief. With a final, desperate push, the vermin burst through the window, a wave of writhing chaos that engulfed the room. I stood frozen, a witness to the reckoning, as the shadows wrapped around my family, their screams blending with the cacophony of scratching and chittering that consumed us all. In the aftermath, I found myself standing alone in the twilight, the house silent behind me. The weight of my triumph felt heavy on my shoulders, a bittersweet victory over the darkness that had once mocked me. I had uncovered truths that the world now feared, but at what cost? The shadows loomed large in my mind, a reminder of the price of disbelief. As I walked away from the remnants of my past, I realized that I had become the very thing I had sought to expose, a warning, a chronicler of horrors that others dared not face. And as the night deepened, I understood that the vermin were always there, waiting, watching, and whispering secrets beneath the surface of our reality. I had survived, but the darkness would never let me go.